Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Metacast podcast. It's the podcast that improves itself, improves ourselves, and improves the self in general. My name is Ty. I'm going to be your host this week, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Distance, right over there. How is your Wednesday going? Jesus, I should know it's Wednesday. We record on the same day every week.
Oh, sorry for our British viewers. I just realized I put up an obscene sign.
What did you do?
If you watch American television, you know that means something different.
What sign did you do? Oh my God.
I just did this. It's a thing from it's actually, I'm not going to do the real deal, but there's a way that you I almost kind of did whatever.
Yeah, you put your thumb in the middle, right?
Well, no, if you curve your fingers, then it's more like the obscene thing. It's this whole idea. It was like a thing during war times where you would, if you captured an archer, you'd cut their fingers off so they couldn't use a bow.
Yeah.
Because you hold the area between the two fingers. And it was it's like, hey, didn't take my fingers, bitch. Yeah. I forgot that we have British people that watch our stream.
That's interesting. I actually heard that the middle finger came from the exact same thing. That it was
that's entirely possible.
Yeah, I think it was I've read that it was a French thing, and it was French archers were trained to release with their middle finger, and they would show the enemy forces that they still had their middle finger because they hadn't been captured. But yeah, I have no idea.
I don't know. One of my British coworkers explained it to me, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting finding out where stuff like that comes from.
Yeah. I'm usually interested in that. So yeah, moving on from obscene hand gestures in England.
I love obscene hand gestures in England, dude. It was weird the other night. I had two people in my chat. They were both from British, and both from the UK. That's the name of the country, right? British land, British.
The
Britannica. I think that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Britannica.
The nation of Britannica.
The kingdom of Britannica. You got to get it right.
That's right.
Technically, it's
a queendom. I thought
it's a queendom. It's a constitutional queendom.
But yeah, I just thought it was weird that it was 100% of the viewers were actually in the complete other side of the planet in the same little. I said small nation, but I think that they pointed out that I guess Britain's actually about the size of California. I didn't think it was that big. That surprised me. I thought California was way bigger than the UK. But
I'm surprised it's that big too. But maps can be deceiving.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because it's crazy because it's midnight there.
Yeah, it's 5 hours ahead for Lee usually. So yeah, it'd be 12:30 a.m. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nuts. It's cool of them to tune in so late.
I know, right? Yeah, Lee always. I love that, dude. The person that is in my channel the most is Lee, and he is on, like I said, 5 hours ahead of me. So often he's watching me till 3 or 4 a.m. It makes me feel so good. It's really cool to have him around. Love you, Lee. Hope you're here. But yeah. So anyways, So apart from our British friends, this week we are continuing the unofficial series that we are kind of doing, exploring. It started with perfectionism and then bled into. I guess I shouldn't say bled into. That's not really the best term, but kind of naturally led into the episode we did last week on failure, and then this week we will be talking about anxiety, which I kind of detailed that in the episode I did about perfectionism. That as I was kind of breaking and unpacking that, breaking that idea down and unpacking it, to me it seemed like perfectionism leads to an anxiety. It seems to be an outcome from the perfectionism. And then I even I went, if you want to go back and listen to that episode, but I kind of determined that there was a core even below perfectionism that may be leading to that. But yeah, so anxiety. What are your experiences like with anxiety? Is that something that you've struggled with in the past?
My whole goddamn life.
So would you consider it something that you're still struggling with then, or do you think it's something that you've got a pretty decent handle on?
It's something that I've gotten way, way, way better at, but every now and then there'll be moments where I have to kind of deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten it under control for the most part, and I can tell you, studying Stoic philosophy was kind of a breakthrough moment for me, but seeing a therapist over the years helped too. because there's a lot of things that we do that, you know, we're not necessarily aware of, that we kind of need a professional to sort of, someone from the outside that knows what to look for can help us kind of find and figure out and navigate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah.
Every now and then things do happen, and the thing for me, at least with anxiety, that I struggle with the most is overthinking.
Yeah.
And I think a lot more people do that than many overthinkers don't realize how many other overthinkers there are.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that many people, I think myself included, they feel like you're a bit of an exception for being an overthinker. You don't, you know, like not that it makes you like special or something like that, but it's just like you feel like you're strange for being, you know, like, oh, I always overthink everything. And then it seems like every person I talk to always overthinks everything. So it's like, I think it's a more common problem than a lot of us believe. But
yeah, I mean, there's a reason why meditation has become such a popular thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That actually makes a lot of sense, yeah. And that's someone that I was listening to today talk about anxiety a little bit. He was talking about depression more, but he did touch on anxiety a little bit. But he was a psychiatrist from the Harvard Medical School, and he had some interesting thoughts on like anxiety and how that ties into some different things we'll be talking about, which I thought was a cool video. It was really interesting to see. But so your experience then with anxiety, when do you feel that started? Do you remember like some
dude, I was like 8 or 9.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a common thing for kids. Like they'll tell you that their tummy hurts or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's a lot of people that think they have gastrointestinal issues for a long time. And it turns out that the reason why they're having the problems they're having is because of like stress and anxiety, just being anxious, excess cortisol, adrenal glands being overactive, things of that nature.
Yeah.
So there's actually a lot of kids that complain about certain issues that are actually more or less related to anxiety, but the children just don't have the language to use it.
Yeah.
I remember like being like 8, 9, 10 years old and getting like really nervous for no reason about things. And like I would have times where it was difficult for me to eat. And it just there's things of that nature. And it would be about all kinds of stuff.
So was it more like social anxiety, or was it even like at home? Like what was
as a kid, from what little I remember of it, it was almost like a constant feeling of stress, or like an excessive awareness of what could go wrong.
Yep.
But at that time, I don't know that it was something that I could really like nail down as like a very specific kind of thing. I mean, I was a bit anxious around other people, like large groups, really. I think in my younger years, like around like middle school, like, you know, 11, 12, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Started to kind of go away at 13 or 14, 15, somewhere in there.
Okay. There's
still some lingering, but then I just got to the point where I stopped being weird around. Actually, I can tell you the thing, and this I'll probably end up coming back to this later, but the reason why I think I got less anxious toward the end of middle school and like the middle of high school is because I got to the point where I was like, I don't care. Like what anybody thinks at all.
Yep.
So I went like so far off into the deep end to start saying like unbelievably crazy shit to people, like almost like pushing people's buttons and seeing how far I could go. That I guess when I just stopped giving a shit what anybody thought in conversation or in interactions, like there was no anxiety anymore. It was essentially a game.
Exactly.
Like how far can you go, kind of thing.
That's interesting, because that's something I hear a lot from I mean, it's usually from like older men. It's not a lot of times that like someone, you know, realizes that in like middle school or high school, but it's like so often I hear that from guys, other podcasts I listen to that are like a lot of times guys in like maybe their 40s or so. And they talk about like hitting this age in either their late 30s or early 40s, where they realize that it's like a lot of times they talk about it in like a dad way almost too, where it's like you just become a dad, that you don't care anymore. You're fine with wearing the sandals and the black socks because you just don't give a fuck anymore. You know, you fully accept the dad lifestyle. And it's like, all right, we're shutting it down. We're no longer a sexual being. I don't need you to like, I don't need to impress anyone. It's just like, it's dad time. I get to just like, you know, I don't give a fuck what anyone thinks, which I can't wait for. I do kind of envy that you were able to realize that so early. and kind of like at a young age be like, you know what, fuck it, I don't care what these other kids think.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, a lot of things that I do, my motivation for most of the things that I do now, as far as how I interact with people, isn't necessarily about wanting people to like me. It's about determining by my sense of like logic and reason what is right and what's most moral, and just living my life like that. Because for me, like, morality is not like, be nice, don't be mean, because most of the time you can sort of figure out what's the best way to interact with people, by thinking about it clearly. So, and a lot of the not caring what people think was more like a things that I say in social interactions, not necessarily what I wore. I mean, I think that clothing, I want to do, I for the most part want to appear kempt, I guess is the word, or like, you know, not disheveled, even though I'm wearing a white t-shirt right now, but that's okay. I got it because it blends in with my earbuds, but my skin doesn't, so you can still see them.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, would you do you have similar experience? I mean, can you remember as far back as I do about having to deal with that sort of thing?
Well, I don't remember it the way that you characterize it, as like a I forget the word you used, but you were basically saying that it was almost like a constant feeling of dread that you had. That it was
like a constant worry about everything.
Yeah. My experience with both anxiety and depression tends to stem from I mean, basically what I remember as like the first memories I have of like thinking of myself as a conscious person, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Because like you can think back of like memories from being a little kid, and you just kind of remember the event that happens. You don't remember how you feel during it or anything like that. You just remember like a flash of some event. But as far as like when I remember the first like interactions, which would have been, I guess probably like maybe first or second grade, because we were living in Utah. So it was like trying to make friends with other school children and stuff like that. I remember feeling what I would now characterize as like pretty extreme social anxiety when like having to interact with people that I did not yet know. And but yeah, that's, I mean, basically like I can't pinpoint a start to it, because it feels like from the earliest memories of those type of situations that I have, it was always there. So I'm not sure as far as like trying to like find a cause, like, or I guess, I mean, a cause of course is like something deeper, but like trying to find like, I can't pick like a linchpin moment. It's not like something happened where, you know, oh, I dropped my towel at elementary school swim practice and now all of a sudden I got anxiety. Like, you know, there wasn't like one particular moment that happened. It's just like, it seems like it was just always, for some reason, groups of people that I was not yet accustomed to being around just made me nervous or gave me some sort of anxiety.
Yeah, and I can relate to what you're talking about, because for a long time I kind of felt the same way. And I actually remember a specific moment when I was clothing shopping with my mom. I think I was 12 or 13.
Okay.
And I was looking at like all the clothing styles that like the cool kids wore. And I was like wanting to like, maybe I'll get this thing and that thing, so then I can look like a cool kid. And then there was this brief moment.
Would this have been like the Abercrombie days, basically, or like what were the?
Yeah,
Okay.
like Abercrombie, American Eagle, that kind of thing.
Okay.
We might be dating ourselves. We date ourselves all the time. I just don't even care.
Yeah, true.
So I had this brief moment where I was like, you know what? Fuck that. So then I went and found like some enormous, like, you know, black Jinkos and like, you know, did the whole like, you know, goth thing or whatever you want to call it. And then went from that to like the whole metalcore thing or whatever. And that was sort of the moment where I decided I didn't care. I was like, I don't want to be like these people. And then slowly that started to build into something else, because, you know, then you look a little different. People start to, you know, make fun of you or say different things or invoke the name of Marilyn Manson or something, even though Alice Cooper is much cooler. and then you just sort of, I guess I just sort of got used to it after a while, because I was like, these people matter so little to me now that I just don't care.
Yeah.
And then I just like say things to get under people's skin, like on purpose. And when you start doing that as like almost like a sport, you really begin to develop a sort of immunity to any kind of harsh thoughts that somebody has, because everyone thinks you're a fucking weirdo.
True. Yeah. Well, and also like there's something I believe like really heavily in most human interactions is like people are going to act the way that you expect them to, if that makes sense. So it's like you start to play into a role, people then see how you're acting, start to respond to that, and basically expect you to be a certain thing, and it kind of reinforces that behavior, if that makes sense. Right? Like,
yeah, there's some kind of, I don't know if it's the right word in this case, but there's some kind of congruency, I think, in the way that people interact with each other. And I think that there people sort of kind of feel out roles in the situation, because there's some individuals where you can just, when you're hanging out, like you can just sort of tell that some friends you'll hang out with and you're completely cool with them like making all the decisions and like leading the way or answering questions or whatever of whoever may be around. And then there's other friends that you have that are more subdued and a little less like, I don't know the word, maybe dominant or assertive, and you just know that that's how you're going to be around them.
Yeah.
And even like in interacting with each other, there'll be sort of a push and pull kind of thing going on. So yeah, I think that what you're saying is true to some degree. But if you get two very, very, very docile people together, more than likely one of them isn't going to end up being like, you know, pushy or anything like that. I think they'll both end up being just sort of timid and standoffish.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Depending upon like the two unique people. But would you say that for you, because we've mostly talked about social anxiety, do you personally get anxious about other stuff? Are there other things in your life that you know you begin to feel anxious when you think about them or have to deal with them?
I would say yes. Okay, so first of all, like before we get too far past it, let's I want to put a pin in that question real quick. What is anxiety? In the begining, let's we kind of blew past even just trying to define it.
Yeah, we usually do that at the beginning, don't we?
Yeah, yeah. So to you, like, is because like the way you asked that question, it really like it got my mind working, and it's like, well, okay, the nervousness I feel about certain things is there a difference between anxiety and nervousness? You know, because I mean, like, there's definitely a difference between like just an episode of feeling sad and depression, right? So
yeah, that's true.
Is that kind of the same with anxiety, where you could just have a nervous episode where you are nervous about a certain event rather than it being actual anxiety? Or is that just 2 degrees of the same thing?
I think that there's kind of sort of a conversational type and then like a clinical type. So sometimes people will say depressed, like I am feeling depressed, doesn't necessarily mean that they're suffering from clinical depression. It just means that they're having a period of time in which they're very sad and they're not exactly sure why.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that anxiety can be like a disorder, or it can just be like a thing that you feel, like you feel anxious, so we call it anxiety. And anxiousness is like, you know, worry or whatever. Here, let me see if we can.
But I would argue that it could possibly be beneficial too. It doesn't seem like it's necessarily an inherently bad thing.
Feeling anxiety and feeling worry are like different things, because anxiety is a very specific kind of feeling. So like if you allow yourself to dwell too much, like, okay, here, well, let's. Interesting.
What Angel just put in chat, I'm actually not familiar with that term. She said eustress versus distress. What is? Are you familiar with the term eustress? EUSTRESS?
Never heard it. Let's look it up. All right.
Moderate or normal psychological stress interpreted as being beneficial for the experiencer. Okay.
So like that's like this is I heard somebody talk about something similar to this, that you shouldn't necessarily feel like stress is a bad thing,
Yeah,
because when you feel stress, the stress can help make you prepared for a certain situation.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
like, for instance, if someone pulls a firearm on you and they point it at you, you're going to have a specific kind of like sort of worry about the fact that this person is pointing a dangerous weapon at you.
Yep.
Or like if you hear um, uh, if you smell smoke or something like that and it's nearby, or you hear a strange noise in the middle of the night that is out of character, or not out of character, that is not typically heard in that context, and you like quickly like look over, like that. Those are like all just normal things that that you're going to be worried about. But like, there's also the idea that like you feel sad when someone dies, or you feel nervous when you see blue lights in your rearview mirror, or you have a feeling of uneasiness when someone is like mean to you. So like, this is all like pretty normal stuff that every person's going to feel.
But that
there's
all
a point.
feels like reactionary, you know, versus like a lot of times when I think of anxiety, it's almost like worrying about something that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, well, it's weird because you can still be anxious about the past. I mean, I've heard people use the general definition that depression is lament over the past, and anxiety is worry about the future. The thing is that, but what they call eustress is typically, however you say it, is typically. I'm actually looking this stuff up now. So it says here that it's something that typically it's positive stress. It motivates, or it focuses your energy. It's short term. It's perceived as within your coping ability, like something that you feel like you can do.
Yeah.
And it almost feels exciting, and it can even improve your performance. But distress, in contrast, causes anxiety or concern, can be short or long term. It's
Okay.
perceived as outside of your coping abilities.
Gotcha.
It feels unpleasant, it decreases performance, and can lead to mental and physical problems. But I think that these are also pretty subjective too, because there's certain things that some people will feel like, you know, I can definitely do this and it'll motivate and excite you, and other people will just collapse and, you know, want to give up. But yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing. I've always heard of it as like, I never heard the actual word, but I've heard of it as like positive stress or negative stress.
Yeah.
And that, you know, one of them readies you, the other one destroys you, more or less.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if we're to read the dictionary.com definition of anxiety, we've got a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease, typically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
And then in psychiatry, it's a nervous disorder characterized by a state of excessive uneasiness and apprehension, typically with compulsive behavior or panic attacks.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's the thing that we talk about pretty often on here about extremes, that if something goes like, you know, far enough one direction, then it's actually like a I don't know, like a disorder, I guess. But if you stay like in a certain, I think that you can get to the side of things where it becomes unhealthy, but no one's going to diagnose it as like a disorder necessarily. And, you know, I think I've only ever had one panic attack in my entire life. Maybe two or three.
What did it feel like? What was it like?
It's like this moment where you feel like no matter where you are, it's the wrong place. And you feel like everything's crushing you, like the walls or the frame of the car or the wherever you happen to be are just like closing in on you. I got like tunnel vision. My vision actually almost looked like the color was washed out. It was this feeling that I couldn't do anything or stop anything or change anything. And it was not very fun. And I'm fairly certain that was a panic attack because of the way that it felt. Like I felt like I couldn't breathe. I felt like that I couldn't take a breath that was deep enough. Like it was like pretty crazy.
How long ago was that? When did that happen?
That was, let me think. Probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it was about 4 or 5 years ago. I just bumped my microphone. Hope that wasn't audible. But I think that when we think about anxiety as being somewhat excessive, that it really isn't necessarily a good thing, because it's a type of worry or nervousness that doesn't really help anything.
Mm.
And I think that
Okay.
it's the same thing, and I don't mean to pick on you here, but like a lot of the time you'll hear people that are cynical say that they're realists. And sometimes you'll hear people that think that their excessive nervousness is like that, I guess, that don't want to necessarily think of it as being a problem. We'll sort of talk about it like, could it be a good thing? I'm not saying that's what you're doing. I figure you're just like devil's advocating to, make the conversation more interesting.
Well, no, the video that I was talking about that I watched earlier with the Harvard psychiatrist speaking about it, he had a lot of positive things to say about it, and was talking about that it's not necessarily inherently bad, and that even was like almost probably, I mean, it may at this point be somewhat like vestigial, but it's like that it was very beneficial for survival, and probably was passed down through natural selection for a good reason.
Yeah, it comes down to what you do with it, really, or if you can. To me, when I hear anxiety, I think of worry about something I can't change or that isn't a problem in the moment.
Gotcha.
And if you think about it as like, so for instance, it's okay to be nervous as you line up to the starting line for like a sprint type race, because that's probably going to help you perform better in that moment. It's probably not that beneficial to feel nervous and stressed out before you line up on I forget what they call the things that you put your feet on, but there's a name for them.
Okay,
But you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, the little like starting blocks thing.
Yeah. That might even be what they call them. Or it's a lot of anxiety, I think, that's negative is things that are outside. And that's why I said that, studying Stoicism and sort of taking a lot of the beliefs and practices of Stoicism to heart, for me, that was a huge benefit because of all the things I was so concerned about that were completely outside of my control.
Okay.
But I mean, would you agree with me that it actually can be a good thing if it's in a situation where you need to do something versus when you can't really do anything?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the definition that the gentleman, I wish I had the doctor's name, actually. I feel like I'm like attributing to him, but I don't actually remember what the guy's name. But the definition that he used was that like anxiety for him was almost the mind's ability to look into the future and foresee possible problems, which can be a very powerful thing. If you're getting ready to do something and there may be dangerous circumstances to it, like being able to think your way through that situation and look for, okay, what possible like issues can I run into? That can be very beneficial. But if you get to the point where the possibilities of negative things are controlling you and preventing you from doing things that you need to be doing, then of course like that's detrimental. If that makes sense. But it's like it seems like the main definition of anxiety though seems to be basically negative. Like it was even calling it like a nervous disorder, and was saying that it like in the definition it had to like impair function.
Yeah. I think that in addition to what you just said, and I may just be repeating part of what you said, oh my goodness, I just lost my train of thought on that one. I hate that this keeps happening on the podcast. It's frustrating when you're on camera live and you can't remember something.
I wouldn't worry about it.
Well, sorry. In addition to what you just said, I think it's okay as long as it's not something that paralyzes you from activity. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
But I think I might be repeating exactly what you just said, and just other words. But yeah, so there was actually a podcast I listened to called Order of Man, and Ryan Mickler, the guy that hosts it, they do a thing they call ANA, like Asked and Answered, and they do like questions. He has a friend named Kip Sorensen, I think is his last name.
Okay.
And somebody wrote in and asked them how they met, and what do you like the most and dislike the most about each other. It was really funny, actually. Ryan Mickler's response was, "We're not married," but because that really sounds like something like, "How did you meet?
Yeah.
What annoys you about
What was your
him?
first date?" Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's like, where did you? So what was the first thing he said to you? Like that kind of thing.
What would he say your favorite food is?
And I wish that somebody would have written that letter in and phrased it that way. But it was funny because Ryan said about Kip that he really liked the fact that Kip was such an analytical guy,
Okay.
and that there were things that he would think about, and like if they had a question or were trying to plan something that they were going to do with the podcast or something like that. I mean, Kip basically just comes on there and does some things and like talk strategy with him every now and then, from what I understand.
Okay.
But he said that he liked the fact that he was analytical, and because Ryan has such a reactive sort of nature, that it was good for him because it would actually force him to think about things a little better, or maybe rethink a question so he could answer it better. And he said that at the same time, and even though he was ashamed that it was a bit of a cliche, that it was a little frustrating because it seemed like Kip would hold things up. Like it almost stop you from acting because we needed to think about everything so hard before we actually did anything, that it gets frustrating. And then it was funny because Kip said the exact same thing. He was like, I really like the fact that Ryan is like a go-getter and he'll go out there and he'll make something happen. But damn it annoys the shit out of me when he jumps the gun and we need to think about something a little bit more before we do something. So one of them, so there's like good and bad about it. So there's like that. I think of it as like a temptation to predict the future.
Okay.
So it's okay for someone, I think, to think about the possibilities that could occur, the few possibilities. But when you get to the point where you absolutely have to figure out every possible scenario, like you must know the future before you do anything at all, that's a really bad thing. So, and the reason why I mentioned the two guys on the podcast on Order of Man is because if you take the two of them and put them together with those specific subjects, they make a pretty good mind. It's a person that's going to think enough before they act.
Yeah.
But they're not going to be paralyzed by thought. That they'll take a reasonable amount of time to figure out what could happen and then go pursue it. And then that's another thing we always come back to here is balance.
Yep, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Yeah.
So it's like, it's good to be able to think about what could possibly occur, but there's a certain point where you just have to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
You have to then act. I mean, because our podcast is a perfect example. I mean, the stuff you talked about on the perfectionism episode, like perfect example of all that stuff, that because you knew that you would try so hard to make everything absolutely perfect, you were just like, fuck it. Like, we'll just figure out what it's about later. Who cares?
Exactly.
Like,
yeah. I guarantee
like, we'll have people on, talk about whatever you want.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I guarantee that if I had not made that decision, it's now 6 months later, I would probably still be trying to think of what the perfect topic would be. I don't even think I would have put out a single episode yet. I would still be like, no, it's got to be about World of Warcraft, but also cover this and all. It's like I would have like really tried to like hone in on like a topic that was me. And it's like, no, that it doesn't fucking matter. Just do it. Just
do it live.
Yep. But at the same time, like you're saying, there are many things where a little bit of preparation is almost necessary.
Yeah, I mean, you can't if you just jump into shit and have no plan whatsoever, that's just unintelligent.
Yeah.
There's a word in the English language, we call that stupid.
Yeah, pretty dumb. But
it ain't the smartest thing.
But there are times where it is almost correct, right? I mean, there are times where almost little to no thought is necessary. So like I feel like identifying those situations is a strong point. If you feel like every situation is one that requires, a huge level of thought, and you feel yourself constantly anxious about every little decision, that's probably a red flag that you're overthinking a lot of things. Or on the other side of that, if you feel yourself just running into many situations gun blazing without thinking about things, that's probably a sign that you do need to think a little more. But how do we find that balance then?
I think that just requires some degree of discernment. I mean, you can really the best thing to do, like, I don't know as far as finding a balance goes, but you can essentially give yourself a specific amount of time to think and ponder something,
Mm-hmm.
and then give yourself a deadline for this is when I act. And it needs to be something realistic, like, I need to plan and figure this out, and I need to have this done in a week, or
Mm-hmm.
plan this, figure this out, determine this possible risks and the possible outcomes, and get this in line and get that sorted out. And I'll give myself a month for that. I don't necessarily think that, 'cause the balance is essentially just like giving yourself a deadline. Just, this is when this gets done, but also kind of, and actually doing it when it's time to do it.
Yeah, that's another big part. Yeah.
So I don't know if, and that balance just depends on the thing. It requires some degree of discernment in the situation of what it is that you're doing. But if it's something like walking across a social gathering to go talk to a new person that you find attractive, you should probably just do that.
Yeah, you don't really have a lot of time.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like, if you look at one thing that Seneca the Younger does is I've only read a few of his letters, but there's a collection of letters he wrote to people called Letters from a Stoic.
Okay.
And Seneca actually, he writes a letter to several friends in several situations and says, look, this is the absolute worst thing that can happen. This is the worst possible scenario.
Mm-hmm.
That is the absolute baddest it can be.
Yep.
So you get there, and in your mind, and then you see what that's like, and then you just go.
Okay.
because it's like, if the absolute worst thing happens and you're mentally prepared for that, then you're prepared for all the other gradients of bad in between.
That's true. Yeah.
I think that if you can put yourself in the absolute worst possible thing, like, not worst probable thing, worst possible thing that could occur in that situation, then you'll be like, you know what, there's not much that's worse than that. So if I can handle that, then I'd be good with probably what happens in this situation.
I forget who it was that I heard talking about this recently, but they were talking about raising their daughter, and they like got to a certain age where the daughter like actually, spoke back a piece of wisdom that he had like imparted on her at a young age. It was like, holy shit, you actually listened. But the piece of wisdom that he gave her, that I loved this quote, but it made me think about anxiety. It's talking about, he was talking about like being anxious or being nervous about something coming up. And it was like, I forget exactly how it was worded, but it was like, if you spend your time being anxious about that or thinking about a bad situation that could come from that, and that does happen, you're just going to live through that twice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're putting a lot of energy into thinking about like the worst situation, or even just planning or like trying to think of like, okay, what bad could happen, you're actually experiencing that situation mentally. And then if it happens, you're just going to go through it again. So it was like, what is the there's the benefit is preparation, but more often than not, you're just going to be causing yourself to relive pain more than you actually need to, rather than like sometimes maybe doing the Band-Aid thing and just, ripping it off. But
causing yourself a nightmare and then living the exact nightmare.
Oh, Angel just brought up a good point too. That could also be like a self-fulfilling prophecy thing. If you spend too much energy thinking about the worst possible situation, is there a chance that you push yourself towards failure because you've put energy towards that?
That's entirely possible, but it really depends upon the person.
Yeah.
Not all the approaches that we mention are necessarily the best for everyone. Yeah. So, there's really and truly everything we say is our opinion. So, but yeah, I think there's some situations in which when you look at because for me, it's like you think about the worst possible thing once, and then that's that. Then you're done with it. However, I think there are some people that will dwell on the worst thing that could happen, and then in those situations, they will end up there. It's just a common thing. There's a book it's very short. It's called As a Man Thinketh.
Okay.
I finished it on my trip actually.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Like one plane ride, Dallas Fort Worth. To North Carolina, and I finished. It's very short, like I said.
Yeah, that's not long of a flight, right? Isn't it only a couple hours there?
Yeah, it's like two and some change.
Okay.
So there's a lot of good stuff in there, but one of the things, the whole point of the book is that he tells you, like, what you think you'll be, and the ideas that you allow into your mind will be who you are. And he talks about how much positive thought is necessary and good, and it's not like stuffy cliche kind of crap. I mean, I think he wrote the book in like 1903.
Okay, I was gonna be like, dude, you need to read The Secret, man. I've got a book for you.
Is it one of those law of attraction books?
It is the law of attraction book. Yeah.
Oh God, yeah.
It's that one that like Oprah pushed and everything. Like, yeah, it's pretty bad.
Did you say Oprah?
Yeah. Dude, Oprah's great. She's like the female Joe Rogan. Man, Oprah's awesome. Don't hate on Oprah.
Maybe neither Oprah nor Joe Rogan are awesome. I mean, I listen to Joe Rogan and I like Joe Rogan, but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'll just read it because Oprah said to.
If anything, you should read it to like figure out what not to think about.
Dude, don't you hate the fact that your nose only itches when you're on camera? I hate that so much.
Oh, mine only itches when people tell me my nose itches. Fuck.
Oh, hey, your nose itches, bro. Yeah. So we've talked about, I think, trying to predict the future, but there is another thing, and this is something that I have specifically had issues with. Predicting what is happening in the present moment, or not predicting, maybe predicting is a word, trying to figure out what is happening in the present moment and a thing you're not present for. So I can give you an example of something that I used to worry about a lot, and I have a feeling that probably a lot of our viewers will be able to relate to, especially if they're our age. I used to do this thing where if I was dating somebody and like she'd be out with some friends or whatever, that I would like freak out about everything that she was doing for no reason, like. And I would like text her, and if she didn't text me back, I'd like get really, really nervous and like freaked out until she did. And I'd be like, oh, okay, great. Ooh, she sent me a text back. Great.
Everything's okay now. Yeah.
Yeah, everything's fine. And then I'd be like, you know what? She's probably fucking an entire lacrosse team right now.
Probably.
For fun. Or whatever. I mean, any number of things. And I was talking to my therapist about this, and he said, well, number one, your worry doesn't make sense, but your relief makes even less sense. Because it's the idea that, fine, she just sent you a text back. You're not actually exerting any control on anything.
Yeah.
And you're putting your well-being and your feelings in control of somebody else. And if you do that, well, then they're just going to be all over the place. And you're going to be anxious about the fact that you don't know how you're going to feel because you're making it someone else's responsibility. And that's kind of where stoicism comes in for me, is that, and that's something I discovered later on, is that you recognize you can't control anything outside of yourself. And then when you stop doing that, then you become a lot more free of things, and that you can really only control the present moment too. Like even of the things that you're able to do, you can only do it right now. Yeah. Like for instance, there's a whole debacle, like where we've got a policy in my apartment complex about vehicle damage and vehicles with a certain amount of damage being towed. And my car has a couple dents on it. And my girlfriend came to check on my cat a couple times while I was gone. Actually, I think you can actually see him back there. I see his butt. I think I'm leaning in the wrong direction. Oops, those were my guitars. That's the right way. I must look really weird. I'm just going to do this little dance now on the camera. So they had this, okay, this is weird. So she sent me a picture of like a tag. My car had gotten tagged to be towed. I'm like, what the shit? And I'm in Texas. Exactly. Like, I'm not here. And she's like, kind of like, you want me to take the label off? I'm like, I don't know if taking the tag off will do anything. I mean, you can if you want to. And so, like, I mean, she ended up kind of peeling it off or whatever. And I was kind of freaked out about it. Yeah. This was on, let's see, what day was this? I believe it was on It was on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
Okay.
So the 26th.
Okay.
And
that would suck to come back from like out of state and your car's been towed. Like that's just a lot of shit to deal with. Yeah,
I'm just gonna show up and take an Uber straight to the towing yard. Yep. So then she could remove the label, and there's a moment where I was kind of like freaking out about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the other thing. This is coming back to the in the present moment part. Mm-hmm. That when there's nothing that I can do, then I should probably just calm down and chill. So I thought, okay, the sticker said it would be towed on Friday. This is Wednesday. The office is closed tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So how about instead of freaking out and causing myself a bunch of worry over here, instead of having fun with my family, maybe I should just calm the fuck down. Maybe I'll worry about it the moment that I call the apartment complex on Friday morning to talk to them about what's happening, because there's nothing I can do. So then what I did is I woke up that morning. It was the Friday after Thanksgiving. And I was a little uneasy, but I thought, whatever, worry about this when you call. So I gave the office a call and, talked to them about what was going on. And actually had some parts on the way. For the vehicle anyway. So we had a brief discussion and everything was figured out. Like she actually said that, the towing company doesn't come unless we call them from the office, and no one's going to call them today because there's no managers here.
Oh, okay.
So she was like, I don't know why it said Friday, but it won't get towed.
Gotcha.
And I talked to them about, I talked, more specifically about the situation, and then we got everything sorted out and it was all completely cool.
Good.
So if I'd spent all my time between Wednesday and Friday morning freaking out about it, it wouldn't have done anything.
Yeah, it would not have improved at all, right?
Yeah. So that's like where the whole in the present moment thing happens, is that, it's so funny because we like to make fun of things that become popular, but this whole idea of like being present really makes a lot of sense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's like talking shit about Honda Civics. Yes, everybody has them, but it's because it's a good car.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's being present. A lot of people are into it, and some people might actually miss the point. But the reason why people are into it is because it's a good idea.
Exactly. Yeah. I think things become trends because they work. Because, not always, but very often. Yeah.
So I think that a lot of anxiety centers around putting too much weight on things outside of yourself. I think that's a major part of it.
Well, that's a great example too, because like we talked about earlier, the times when what I'm gonna call anxiety, but there's a little bit of difference in the definition, but there's times when the preparation, the thinking about what could go wrong is actually beneficial. That situation there was really nothing you needed to prepare for that conversation. If you would have spent the entire day Thursday worrying about, okay, how is this conversation going to go? What do I need to, there's no way that you weren't going to be better prepared for that conversation than you were by not thinking about it at all. But there are situations, and you can determine that, where maybe you do have a phone call coming up in 2 days, and there are things you could be doing to be better prepared for it. And that's a situation where there is actually a benefit to doing that. So it's just kind of trying to be rational about, okay, what is this actual situation? Step back from it. I think a big part too, like you isolated, is stepping back from your emotional attachment to that situation. The fact that, it's your car, it's your way to get to work and everything, like there's an emotional attachment there that it's like it kind of has an extra stress versus like just stepping back and just saying like, okay, it is a car. I have to make a call about it. It's fine. But I can understand why as a human it would be almost natural to kind of freak out over it. But
and it is. It is completely natural. And I think that's the reason why it takes such a long time for some of us to deal with this sort of thing. Because even the knowing that you can do something to prepare means that you can prepare to do that now.
Yes.
So that makes it something that's relevant in the moment, like the present moment now.
Yep.
But it's also, once you've done what you can do, kind of let it be. Okay, here's a question for you.
Okay.
When you send a rather long text message to somebody, do you go back and read it a couple times after you've sent it before they responded to you? Because I do that sometimes.
I will. So here's my normal texting ritual, I guess, for lack of a better word. I will draft the text. A lot of times, okay, so if it's a long text, I even do this. I will draft it in notes. And that way, if it's another iPhone user, they don't see the 3 dots for 10 minutes there. You know what I mean? So I'll type it out in another app and then copy and paste it over into the text, the messaging app, and that way they don't see that I'm sitting there typing for like 20 minutes straight. But yeah, so I'll get a draft put together. I'll proofread that draft. I'll try to look for like, spelling errors or like grammatical errors or things like that. And then after I send that text, then there's the like, I think I only reread it maybe once. It's like once it's sent, I will reread the conversation and just like double check, I guess, for spelling errors. But no, I try not to read it too many times. But I probably do all of because of going through the extensive setup. I probably do that enough already, I would say. But
you know how like a lot of the time, like the way that we joke is that you're like really facetious, and then I play it like the thing we did at the beginning with England and like, called it Britannica and like, oh, it's a queendom. And then and that thing that we do.
Yeah. Was
everything you just said serious?
Yeah. Yeah,
so that was not like some like fun thing, like our type of humor thing you just did.
No, I mean, I said it with like an inflection to make it a little more lighthearted, but no, yeah, I mean, it is definitely true that like, I know that if I have to send a long text, I will draft it usually in notes first. And then like once I type a text out, before I send it, I usually read it at least once or twice just to check for like spelling errors or like things like that.
Oh, wow.
Is that bad? That can't be a bad thing.
I mean, it's a text. It's the fact that you use an alternate application on the phone for the sole purpose of that person not seeing the little dot. You think they're going to stare at their phone for 10 minutes and just be like, there's dots. I'm still seeing dots. There's dots here.
I do that, dude. If I'm sitting like
is it because you're anxious about what the person's going to say?
Probably, yeah, dude. If I'm in like a long conversation with someone and I see those 3 dots for like 5 minutes just moving every once in a while, it's like, holy shit, they're typing me a fucking novel right now. And then I think it triggers anxiety that I have to read the long ass thing that they're writing, and that's just like that's not good for anyone. So like, I just want to. I also like to hide information, right? It comes from just like different games I play where you take value in the hidden information. Like, I mean, from Magic, you play a card game, there are certain things that are hidden information. If I can keep someone in a situation from knowing something they don't yet know, I see benefit in that. So it's like, if they don't know that I'm typing a text message to them, that's insane, isn't it? That's actually crazy. That is like,
dude, life is not poker. You're not playing poker with the person you're texting.
Actually,
it's not a Magic the Gathering tournament.
Oh my god! Actually, like hearing myself talk through that thought was just like, no, this is insanity. Like this is actual craziness.
I'm gonna really need for you to re-listen to this one. I need you to hear yourself say all that again.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Well, it's funny because when I said the thing about when we were texting about this episode, and I said that we'd probably be able to fill up a lot of time on this. I wasn't kidding.
Oh, yeah.
It seems that we're having no challenge with this one at all.
Yeah, this is a
there's
great
no
topic.
struggling here. But I even still do it now with texting where I'll read a message a few times and I'll read it like 6, 7, 8 times after I've sent it. And it's like, dude, that same the that you left out is still not there.
Yeah.
Or there's no mistakes. There's still no mistakes. There will be no mistakes the next time you read it.
Do you try to fix them then afterwards? After you notice that the wasn't there, do you like retype it with an asterisk?
Sometimes I'll just let it go. Okay. I think another thing with this type of anxiety is that most people acknowledge that they're not perfect. So when they see that you have done something that's not perfect, they don't think anything harshly of you because everybody. Yeah. I'm trying to think. What did I say to? I made a really, really hilarious error in a text recently, but I'll have to remember what it was. But it was pretty funny. But it's gotten to the point now where it's funny with text messages to people I work with. I'm a lot less worried about spelling things wrong or not.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're busy and they're in such a hurry, they're not going to care.
Yeah.
And everybody's texting quickly when they're doing like work related stuff in the middle of the workday, so it doesn't really bother me that much.
Yeah.
But there's like if I use the wrong your and I've done it before,
that's an unforgivable trespass.
I will absolutely flip out. Like I'll send another text, be like, "Oh my god, I cannot believe I just did that. I cannot believe I'm one of those people. I always talk shit about people fucking this up. I can't believe I just did it. This is terrible. I hang my head in shame."
Yep.
And usually the person on the other end is like, "It's cool. And I'm like, oh.
That's actually where I use the go-to gif of oh shit, I forget what his name was. The youngest son in Game of Thrones when he was king for a little bit, and there's that scene where he just like takes the crown off, sets it down, and just like jumps out of the window. I love that gif. It like perfectly, it like sums up that moment where it's like I typed out a long message, I used the wrong "your." It's like, nope, we don't deserve this anymore, and let's just kill ourselves.
And other times it's actually really funny. I need to find that gif. I'm one of those people that chases down the taco truck to tell the driver that they don't watch Game of Thrones. That's me. I stand on top of the display case in JCPenney and throw the mannequin over and proclaim loudly to the entire store that I don't watch Game of Thrones.
So
I'm that guy.
Have you watched any of it? I forget if you didn't give it a chance.
I watched enough of it. I've watched enough of it to hate it.
Oh wow.
But that GIF you talked about is pretty hilarious, and I might need to find that.
Yeah. Well, I used it in the conversation with Bridget one time. Like she had a GIF of someone like jumping off of a bridge, and I posted that one like right afterwards. But
I don't know if I might need to go back and find that because that's freaking hilarious. Unless it was one of the weird ones I didn't get.
Oh yeah, maybe.
But yeah, that's a lot of the time people will be like, or if you do something like that, they'll be like, yeah, it's okay, I do it too.
Yeah.
Or that sort of thing. And then everything's kind of cool after that, and then you realize, oh, there was no reason to freak out. But like for work related stuff, using the wrong "your," even at work, I'm kind of like, oh shit, that's really bad. Like leaving something out here and there is not that big of a deal, but using the wrong, like something that should be a contraction that's not, or should have a letter in it that's not, or just like common like grammatical errors that make people feel like they might be talking to someone who's unintelligent.
Exactly.
But yeah. I feel like we're kind of going off on a tangent here. I tried to find that GIF you were talking about on my phone. I'm not going to worry about it right now.
I'll send it to you later.
Okay. But yeah, I think we're kind of like getting off on this weird tangent about grammar. So, but yeah, it's like, and I'll do a thing like where I'll send a text to somebody and I'll be weirded out about them not saying something back.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like I was actually sitting here thinking yesterday that the current relationship I'm in seems to be working out particularly well.
Good. That's good.
And but the reason why has a bit to do, yes, with the partner that I've chosen at this point in time. And if you're listening, don't let it go to your head.
Well, you did just say a bit to do with it, so she doesn't get like that much credit.
So. Yeah, that's true. But it does take twos to tangos. So I realize that a lot of it has to do with the fact that I've changed a lot. And there's a lot of weird stuff, like weird anxiety issues that I had. Because it's funny because like with everything else that we talk about, like so many things that we talk about tie into many other things.
Yeah.
And, confidence, self-esteem has a lot to do with it also, particularly when it comes to romantic relationships. That it's like, like, hey girl, you're dating a smoking hot silver fox, he's quite appealing to lots and lots of folks, could run away from you at any moment, girl, you better watch out. But instead it could just be like, hey girl, you fly as fuck and you're all rational and got a good head on your shoulders and got all the stuff going for you. That fine ass man ain't gonna go nowhere, sugar. Like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know what your internal voice sounds like, but mine calls me girl, and sounds a lot like that. So yeah.
Mine sounds a lot like Venom from the horrible 2018 Venom movie.
That movie was. There's like one good scene.
There were a few good scenes.
Yeah.
It sounds a lot like that though, where it's like, like I'll like the elevator scene. That is like textbook example.
About to jump off the building.
Yes, well, that is like textbook example of what my inner voice does. Where it's like, it's like I'll get the idea that it's like, no, I can do something, and then the inner voice is like, no, you can't. I'm like, oh, okay, that's right. Yeah, no, you're right. Or it's like, yeah, no, I can.
I forgot.
Yeah, hold on. No, I don't want to do that. I'm going to take the elevator. Pussy. Like, yeah, that's exactly what happens. Like, the inner voice is just constantly like, yeah.
So your inner voice is like a squirrel's inner voice. It's like, I'm crossing the street. No, you're not.
Feeding nuts.
Yeah, it constantly craves nuts. That actually, I do eat a ridiculous amount of almonds, so that may be true.
Well, then in that case, my inner voice probably sounds a lot like yours, if it tells you that kind of thing. But yeah, my cat just bit my foot. That was not. But ow, motherfucker! I just bit my hand.
He likes to try to kill you during episodes. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer cats to have like do a little bit of violence because it's like, you know, kind of in their nature.
Yeah.
I don't want him to suppress all of that, but like, you know, why during a podcast? He doesn't draw blood. It's just enough to be like, yep, something just put its teeth on me. That's not very appealing all the time, I don't think. So yeah, I think that the majority of anxiety involving interactions with other people in any way, I think a lot of that is related to self-worth and valuing your potential and valuing the sort of individual that you are. And in many cases, it's about valuing yourself over the other. That you can. There are times where someone's opinion matters so much to you that. And it's the other thing, you're trying to figure out what they're thinking.
Yeah.
Like you want to know what they're thinking. It's that same like weird idea of like predicting and looking toward the future and all that.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. It's the same idea of trying to figure something out that you can't necessarily know.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It is a known unknown, but you're still trying to know it.
And then there's even like hindsight anxiety where you look back on a situation that's already happened and you go crazy thinking about all the stuff you could have done better.
Oh God. Yeah. Okay. So I've never considered that anxiety. I've never thought of that before, but that happens to me a lot. Yeah.
The time that I had that panic attack was actually thinking about something that I'd done that was a bad idea that I could have handled better. And the idea that I couldn't do anything about it now. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the thing that actually made me freak out that one time. I won't be very specific because it's kind of like it was just a really crappy situation, not necessarily something I want to talk about on the podcast, but
gotcha.
It was just and there's the moment where I just completely lost my shit.
Yep.
It was because it was something that had already happened, not something that was currently happening or was going to happen. And there was some idea of what was happening now. Like, what is this person thinking after like this, I said this thing and acted this way about this particular thing. So maybe there's a little bit of freaking out about the present moment, but it was primarily about how it handled the situation that had already happened.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I think that can cause people a lot of like inner turmoil. I think that whenever you beat yourself up about something that's already happened, I would call that anxiety too.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
But it's a pretty extreme nervousness.
See, that to me, normally it's like cringe moments. It's things that like where I said something really stupid and then that just replays in my head.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that if you can think about the dumb stuff that's come out of your mouth in the past, everybody else you know, and even probably the person you said that to, is right now too busy talking about all the dumb stuff that's come out of their mouth or thinking about the dumb stuff that's come out of their mouth. More than likely.
True. Yeah. Like how often when I'm laying down to try to go to bed, does someone else's stupid moment pop into my head? I don't think about like when John shit his pants in 3rd grade in front of everyone. Like that moment doesn't pop in my head, but it's when I said you too to the person at the movie theater when they said enjoy your movie. And that keeps me up. Like, you know, it's like it's so fucking stupid, but
I mean, when I used to work at Blockbuster, I'd be like, those will be due back Wednesday. You too. I'm like, wait, what? So your U2 wasn't nearly as bad, but the thing is now I'm thinking about that person whose name escapes me.
Yep.
But yeah, and the thing is like you've known me for over 20 years.
Yeah.
At what point do you know a lot of dumb shit that I've done? At what point do you sit and think, oh yeah, Distance did that shit in 8th grade?
Never. Yeah. Literally never. I think like occasionally the day skateboarding pops into my mind, but that wasn't something stupid you did. That was just like a funny moment. It was like other than that, yeah, it's like I don't ever think of someone else. Are
you talking about the scar I have on my chin?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you know the exact moment. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was like more of just an accidental awful thing. I don't remember half the shit I said after that skateboard hit me in the mouth, but I'm still not even entirely certain how that happened. But
I have no idea. I don't even remember like what we were trying. Like we weren't like
weren't
even
doing anything crazy.
No, it
really
was like on a street. Like it wasn't. I mean, we were both so new to skateboarding that like there weren't hard tricks we were attempting. So I have no idea what it would have been. I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, I mean, you had to like think really hard about it, but that wasn't necessarily an embarrassing moment for me.
Exactly.
There's a bunch of other things that happened that I'm thinking of that you know about that you'd probably would never even pop into your head. So
I'm like really trying hard now.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just realizing that everyone else is just as selfish as we are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That they don't care about you any more than you care about them as far as their like huge mistakes go. And once again, I think it comes back to the same thing that everybody knows they're not perfect and everybody knows they screw up.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that same thing happens. Somebody that doesn't know that, then well.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. I think that same thing happens a lot with I've read this so much with people trying to start at a gym. And they're so nervous that the other people at the gym are judging them that they don't take the second to think that like, no, everyone at the gym is just trying to get through their workout. They're not paying any attention to you. They're like, it's such a selfish thought though, to think that like, oh, that person over there is too worried about what I'm doing over here for me to get this workout done. Like but so many people have that anxiety. I don't understand why that's so common.
Yeah. And I mean, and even if like people are trying to lift and anybody there that's like a physique athlete or a bodybuilder or just kind of into themselves, which I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Like a lot of those folks are too busy like checking out at the peak of their bicep is where they want it to be in the mirror. Mm-hmm. So it's like no one's really worried. They're not like, look how awful that chick looks. It's like, look how great this guy looks. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
I realize it's
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, comical for me to do that on camera. I'm gonna stop.
I like how I'm watching a delayed, like my actual screen of you is back here, so I'm watching the stream delay, so I don't actually get to see you doing things at the time that I hear it. So like the flex was like a few seconds late for me, and it was even funnier. It was good stuff.
Oh, and I feel like that's an embarrassing moment I'm gonna look back on now.
And now
you're like,
it's gonna be on YouTube forever.
It's permanent. Like you can go back and I can relive this again.
Yep, I can clip that.
But then again, like you probably didn't even think of that as something embarrassing for me.
Not at all.
And you probably won't think about it later. I mean, in reality, it's not. I was just using it as an example.
Yeah.
But it did look ridiculous on camera. But yeah, I mean, that's true. And it's when I like as far as cycling stuff goes, the first like actual road bike event that I went to, like mountain bikers are different, but the first road bike event that I went to, like nobody really cared about anything. They were making sure their stuff was working and making sure they remember their water bottle and they had, provisions in case something broke, they were filling up the air in their tires. They were, checking the functionality of their bike, making sure that, everything worked on. They were worried about them and getting through the event, not me and how silly I looked. Even though like I didn't look that silly because everybody shaves their legs when they ride road bikes.
Have you ever heard of
I did it.
Good. You better shave those legs. I think you should keep up with it. I think you should start shaving them again.
That shit was dangerous, man. I cut myself like 8 times. I'm never doing that shit again.
Just
like I don't even want to like. Ew, that's even worse. I don't want to win in Rome ever again with roadies. I'm just gonna be hairy and have everybody not pay attention because they don't care.
True. Have you ever heard of the idea of Sonder? Sonder. It's briefly described as the realization that each random passerby is living a life as vivid and complex as your own. It's kind of like what we're talking about, where because we are the quote unquote star of our story, we feel like our experience is something that everyone around us is like centered around, right? I mean, because technically you are the center of your own universe, right? Like, but we're not the center of everyone's. So it's like the idea of Sonder, like realizing that you are incredibly important to yourself, but you are not that important to every random person. You're important to your loved ones. I don't want to tell people that their loved ones don't think they're important, but the people that you don't fucking know at all, the people at the gym that you're scared are judging you, you don't matter to them. I'm sorry. I like hate to say that, but you really don't matter at all. Like the only time that I can ever think that, I I've thought about like what someone else was doing at the gym is when I see someone going to hurt themselves. If they're doing something like unsafe, that's when it's like, it's not judgmental. It's just like, hold on, it might be in best interest to like, talk to someone about what's going on here. Other than that, it's like, I'm not sitting judging someone like, oh, their form on that is horrible, or like they should just give up. Like that's no one thinks like that. And if they do, they're a horrible asshole, and you probably shouldn't care what they think anyways, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, that person's obviously just they're too worried about everyone else to be better themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. But so anyways, I earlier we put a pin in a question to go under the definitions, and I think we've circled back now. I want to try to answer that question. You were asking, I guess, basically like how often I feel anxiety, or like when I feel that pop up the most.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was more like about outside of social.
Yeah, because I definitely, but when you say outside of social, like social anxiety to me means scared of some sort of social interaction with a group, normally like public speaking, things like that. Like that's social anxiety to me. If you're just texting with one person that you do know pretty well, and let's say you have some of the nervous thoughts that we were talking about earlier, is that still technically social anxiety because it is anxiety about a social situation?
Yeah, I mean, I would call it interacting with an individual, like having some sort of anxiety about interacting with one person is still social anxiety. Obviously, it's different. It's different in a larger group. Yeah. I think more people can understand the large group thing.
And it feels, the two feel very different to me too, which is why I ask. When I'm like thinking about the prospect of like if I were to be going out to like a party or a bar or something, and there's a lot of people there that I don't know, and I'm gonna have to have conversations with people that I haven't interacted with before, that gives me a very different feeling than when I'm texting with someone and it's like I've texted them and it's been 10 minutes and it's like, okay, did they read my text and they don't want to respond? Did they not see it? You know what I mean? Like that kind of anxiety feels very different to me, but I guess like you're saying that they are both in regards to social situations. So that's definitely when I feel anxiety the most.
But I mean, you don't feel anxiety at any other points or any other times or about anything else?
See, that's the weird thing is I would say that I do, because I mean, so there's a reason why I grabbed this pillow, right? Like it stands out to me because like this emote, the like Monka S, it means like anxiety. It means like being constantly nervous about things, and I feel like that is a position, like an emotion that I'm in very often, way too often. Like even, I mean, work related stuff, yeah, tons of stuff. I feel like I'm constantly overthinking and over preparing for things that I have coming up. I would say that a lot of it does border on not being what would we call it? Your eustress. I would say that a lot of it is distress. Yeah. I mean, there are like, of course, if I've got a meeting this like a certain day and I know that like I need to prepare for that meeting, that's beneficial. That there's a level of stress that I could feel there that is actually good. I would assume that the level of nervousness and stress that I feel probably goes beyond that, and that it's not actually helping. That it's just for some reason I get nervous about situations like that or things.
So I think it sounds like that there's a sort of thing that we're not really addressing as far as how to handle this goes, because the stuff that you're talking about is things that I think I haven't had to deal with that sort of thing.
Okay.
So it's maybe when I was very young, but even then, like I can't recall most of that very vividly anyway. So my recollection of it is not very reliable.
Gotcha.
But what you're talking about is something that I haven't had to deal with much. So at least for me, like I haven't talked about how to deal with that because I never have like tried. I've never experienced it. Mm-hmm. It sounds like you've almost got a habit of overthinking stuff that's in your control.
Yes.
And maybe thinking that there's always something more you could be doing, but there's a point where you can determine that you've done everything that you can do. But the problem is, like, how do you get there? Like, how do you
Exactly.
know? And I think maybe it's just because I don't know, I put when the list of topics that I sent you a while ago, I put a question mark after the word schedule because I didn't know if that was something that we'd really want to talk about necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if people can like schedule a time to work on specific tasks, and then only worry about that task in that time frame, then that is a way that you don't even have to think there's something else you could be doing because you only do it during this period of time. Like if you know this thing needs to be done, then I do this and this and this at this time, and this time on these days. And then when I'm not working on that thing at those times, then I just won't worry about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that that's not something that someone, and this is just a thought. I mean, I don't know if this is even effective at all for some people, but over time, I think that doing the scheduling of the task to get to the goal and only doing those things or worrying about those things during that period of time, I think after a while, using that scheduling as an exercise won't be necessary because an individual will get used to not worrying about that specific thing all the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can see that.
But, you know, one of the things that I don't know if you can relate to this or not, but one of the things for me is that my mind is just very, very, very busy.
Yeah.
And it's difficult for me when I have multiple things at once to do. But it's like, I don't know who said it, but there was a quote, some author, I think, like the one who chooses multiple things to do at a given time gets nothing done.
Okay, I like that quote.
Or it's something like that. I'm butchering the hell out of it, but it's like the idea that if you choose to do a bunch of stuff at once, then you won't actually do anything.
Yeah.
And that's like kind of what happens with my mind, is that I've had to learn over time to focus on one task at a time. And working the job that I do, working in a service role, it's difficult to do that because you end up changing gears quite a lot because you have multiple requests and multiple issues that people are throwing at you. Yeah. So it's about like using a schedule to focus on just the one thing and then not worry about it outside of that time frame. And then it's also avoiding thinking about stuff that you can't do anything about in the present moment. It's deciding when to close the case in your mind and come back to it later. And I think a lot of that stuff is much easier said than done. And I personally have nothing to say from experience that's worked for me because I've never had to deal with that specific kind of anxiety.
Well, I think you touched on one of the most important words right there. Is I think a lot of it comes from experience. I think that you go through the situation, you learn from, well, ideally you learn from it, and you learn how to better handle it in the future. You know, like maybe the first time you're working a job like that, it's way different than once you've been in the career for 15 years and you know, it's just like, you know, normal day.
Yeah. That comes back to the difference between de-stress and eustress, that maybe something that you're distressed about over time, you will experience that thing and create a sense of preparedness. And then perhaps that thing will not be as distressful anymore. It'll actually be a more beneficial stress. Or when something, even a task that you haven't done before, if you've had other tasks that have been distressing, that you can use those other things to try to handle the stress you're feeling from something that you haven't done before. That was a lot of words. I hope that made sense.
It did though. Yeah.
Yeah.
That does
So I mean, that's so a sense of preparedness, I think, or a realistic understanding of your preparedness for a situation, I think could also be beneficial. And eventually that bad stress can maybe become a good one.
I like that idea. I like the idea of like transmuting the stress, where like you can take distress and turn it into eustress. I really like that.
I mean, even today, like all the technical difficulties we had, like you seemed a little less freaked out about them today than you were like when we were dealing with them, you know, 4 months ago.
Exactly. Yeah. It just kind of becomes business as usual, right? Like
there's a sense that something needed to get fixed and that it needed to happen quickly. But there was also this idea that I think, because just because this podcast is also about itself, our audience should know that because I do IT work for a living, if anything breaks regarding the podcast, I'm like, figure it out, Ty.
Yep.
Like I'm completely useless. Like I don't do anything. Like today, I was just kind of like, yep. That sucks.
Actually, no, you actually helped a lot. You just suggested changing browsers, which did actually work.
One suggestion and sounded like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, The Hangover, when I said it.
Yeah, true.
So, so it was like, I mean, I helped a little bit, but for the most part, like, I mean, a lot of it just comes down to you because I'm so tired of fixing problems by the end of my day that I'm like, you fix your own goddamn computer.
I don't blame you. I'm having to move into like more of an IT role, and it's like it's bugging me. There's like we still outsource it, but it's like my entire like past 2 weeks have been consumed with like dealing with this one fucking printer that just won't act correctly, and it's like it is now like I feel your pain because it's like I'm constantly just having like warehouse people coming to me and it's like, hey, the printer broke again. I'm having to like go back out to the warehouse and fix the printer again. And,
are you finding it de-stressing?
I'm just finding it annoying, I guess. It's not, I don't know if it doesn't fall under distress, but it's because, I mean, also, I feel like a lot of it is actually user error. I think they're just doing something really fucking stupid and no one's admitting to it. And that's the part that's kind of annoying, but yeah, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, so we've identified that, I mean, the definition that we're going to use for anxiety here is mainly negative. Anxiety comes with distress. We have isolated that, I mean, it is beneficial to prepare for certain things as long as you've actually got some control over the situation and there's something you could actually be preparing for. If you are... How do you do this though? If you can rationally sit down and think about the situation and realize that you do have your actions, your choices do have some sort of consequence, and that you do have the power and the time to think about and possibly prepare for that, that could be beneficial. But it's also very often going to happen that you sit down and you think about a situation and you realize that every single part of it is out of your control. And those are the situations you need to not distress about at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's a thing that you can't really do anything about it. So you won't, there's no point in really thinking about it at all. And the other thing is that if you budget a certain amount of time to think about something before you do it, that's a reasonable budget, then you will recognize after you just pull the trigger numerous times that the worst case scenario probably isn't going to happen. But even if it does, it's something you can handle. That if you think about all the bad shit that's happened in your life before now, that you're still alive. So
Yep. Yeah. I like what Angel just said in chat. I think it is. Is it the Lord's Prayer? But it's like the AA motto.
Yeah, like, that's the Lord. I was actually thinking about that just then.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, yeah, having the what is the actual word though? Giving the wisdom.
No, courage. It's not. That's not. I don't think that's not the Lord's Prayer. It's not. But it's something that's. It's a prayer for something. I forget what specifically. It's like a rehearsed prayer.
Yeah,
but it's something that's said in AA. I mean, I had a friend that was in AA. I went to a few meetings with them.
But it's the courage to accept the things I cannot change. No. I don't remember what the first one is. It's the something to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
The serenity.
Thank you.
It's called the Serenity Prayer.
Serenity now. That's right.
It's called the Serenity Prayer. That's what they call it. Yeah, God grant me the serenity, but it doesn't have to necessarily be God. You can just say grant.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but I would actually I tend to end on quotes.
Okay.
And I really think this one is good as far as like a busy mind goes, or overthinking things and causing yourself anxiety. It's Henry David Thoreau, and the quote goes, "It is not enough to be busy. So are the ants. The question is, what are we busy about?"
I like that. God, I should have gone first because your closing statement is so much better than
Sorry.
mine. Fuck, no, it's all good. It's all good.
No, make yours. What you got to say? Let's close it up.
I'm gonna say anxiety bad. No. I'm gonna say fuck. Okay, so I'm gonna
This
say
is really awful. You were right.
it is. I'm so anxious right now.
So okay.
No. I've got
Calm
this.
down.
I've got this. So we need to, I mean, like we talked about, take the time to assess the situation before you get yourself worked up. Realize that anxiety is more often than not an emotional response. Emotions are tough to deal with, but you can figure out when your emotions are getting the better of you, and you can rationalize what the best course of action is. The biggest thing that I would say is keep in mind, though, your anxiety actually is trying to help you. It can hurt you if you listen to it too much, but it is there for a reason. So there are situations where maybe it is telling you to prepare. Don't go into situations unprepared that you should have been prepared for. And on the other side of that, don't over prepare for things that you really have no business thinking about. If you can't control the situation, just accept that and move on with it. Your quote was so much better. God damn it. But yeah, so that's going to bring us to the end of another episode of the Metacast podcast. If you guys are watching this on YouTube and you've enjoyed the conversation, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to keep up to date with what we're doing here, and comment below and let us know what your experience with anxiety is. Have you overcome it? Are you still struggling with it? And did we get anything wrong? I would love to hear the things we get wrong. Honestly, those would probably be the comments that I would be most excited about. Is like all caps, you guys are fucking idiots, you messed this up, and then like correct us. That would be great. But if you're interested in further taking part of the conversation or even joining us as a guest on a future episode, join our Discord. The link is in the description down below. And don't forget to join us next week for another episode live Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on twitch.tv/TylerTV. Thank you guys for listening, and I hope you all have a great week.